Hi, this is Easy Ann, and I'm coming to you from a space and place of love and grace. I want to introduce to you a friend of mine that I've known for many years. We met when we both lived in Memphis, and now she lives in a beautiful estate in the hills of Arkansas. I visited her there, many acres. It's absolutely beautiful. And she's an author and has written a number of books, but the book that I really was intrigued with is her book called Flying with God, in which she talks about her adventures as a flight attendant. So I want to introduce to you my friend Bettina Sparkles. Now, Bettina, if you would, if you'll, I'm embarrassed that for some reason I never seem to be able to get your last name right. So if you'll just tell us your last name and just go on and tell us your website too as well while you do that, and then I'll get back with you with some questions. Go.
Thank you, Annie. It's so good to see you. My last name is a classic. Obernuefemann. Obernuefemann. You sort of swallow it. Obernuefemann.
Obernuefemann. There must be some mnemonics to be able to get that. Obernuefemann. Yeah. Then how did you get the name Sparkles?
As a matter of fact, I don't think you remember this, but you have something to do with that.
Sounds vague. I mean, vaguely familiar. But
okay, let me tell you. You had at the Connection Church a afternoon one-day meeting and meditation for finding a spiritual name. And you led the meditation, and there were about 20 people. And we meditated, and then everyone shared, and some came up with names, and I did not. But in a few days, a blind friend from Michigan called me, and he said, "Hello, Sparkle Eyes." And I said, "You've never called me that before." And I told him the story about the spiritual name. He says, "Sparkles sounds good." And I said, "Well, thank you for that." He said, "Don't thank me. Jesus gave it to me to give to you."
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you. If you had told me that, which I'm sure you have, I had forgotten. So that's a wonderful story. So I'm glad I asked you the question. That is so super.
Absolutely.
So I know that you wrote the book Flying with God, and how did that come about? How did you decide to write that, and how were you able to get so much detailed content for that book?
It's an amazing journey our life is. The book is called Flying with God, Putting on a Happy Face. So really, we have to start at the beginning, and I'm going to compress it. I came from Germany at 10 years old with my parents. I was born during World War II. And my mother and my father were involved with themselves and raged a lot. Anyway, after we had come here, she told me, forget all of the relatives. I was missing my cousin, my aunt, grandma. Anyway.
Your life, your whole life was gone. You had to start over.
I was in therapy, they call it dissociation. Emotionally, I was cut off.
Yeah.
So my haven was school. So I got into school, skipped a few grades, and even graduated when I was 17. And I always wanted to be a school teacher. However, that was not to be. Now I believe all is in divine order. So I applied for flight attendant. At the time, it was called stewardess job.
Right.
Yeah, and stewardess is a different world. At that time, it was. It's a classic, that Flying with God. It shows that like 1,000 people, ladies would apply, and only one got hired out of 1,000. There were special things. You had to be single, 5'2" or more, proportionate weight and height, etc. And
it was an era. It was an era.
It was an era, and even the conditions. And I write that in the book, a little bit of my life in Germany, my life in. By the way, we went to Canada first. Anyway, then we moved to the United States, and the era of the stewardess, there were no jetways. That is a biggie. There was no security. All that has evolved. And the interesting part of the story, I had so many adventures during that life, is like I flew out of Las Vegas, and I only flew we flew what they called mail hops. The government subsidized the airline. I flew to the Grand Canyon, Flagstaff, Arizona, and Phoenix, say for example. And sometimes there weren't any people on. I was like a passenger. I've even hopped into the cockpit one time and flew across the canyon from the South Rim to the North Rim. That was an exciting adventure.
Well, I know that during this time, I think the way you got the content, I just wanted to say, is that you started keeping journals at this time, correct?
Yes, actually, for 50 years, it stuck with me until I was on a military charter flight. It brought back a child abuse recall of, I'm going to be careful how to say this, is my mother locking me in the closet and force feeding me, and I was tied up. That's all I'm going to say about it. You see, at this time in my life, I've worked it all out. I'm content, and that's what I wanted to start out with, is that I have never been more peaceful than at this time in my life. I have no regrets of my journey. And I have done, and it's a process, the forgiveness process. And I have inner peace. I know who I am.
Well, let me go back.
And because of that.
Let's go back a little bit and just fill in. So what it is, as you started, I want to explain, as you started being a flight attendant, you started journaling and everything, that things, I mean, you had a beautiful life on the outside, but there was a time, which I think you're talking about, when you had a memory. And so as everything came crashing back to you, you had to deal with this. And at this time you were still working, correct? Were you still a stewardess at this time?
Yes.
And then you had to learn to deal with
flashback.
the flashback, and you were still daily going to
The,
work,
the
and I guess you were just
in the middle of, yes.
of your
And I
career.
wasn't a writer. I was a, yes.
You
When
were
I, yes, the flash, yes, it came back during the 38-year career. So it was in the middle of it.
okay, in the middle
And
of
I started keeping journal. Yes.
okay, and so what?
It came.
And so that kind of debilitated you, and you were already debilitated anyway, but you didn't know it. You were unaware of it, but now you were more aware of it. So what were some of the steps you took that helped you move out of that tragedy while you were working all the time, and how did you deal with that?
Okay.
Oh, and let me ask you, and this is all
It came
this is all in the book, right? This is all in the book.
Most of, yes. Yes and no. The first book is about my flying career to the 70s. Then I have another book on PTSD
Okay.
that shows how I cleared it up or processed it. And then I even came at the very end, came up here last 2 years ago with a spiritual book. So that tells, there are 3 genres in one book that describe my life's journey. So
you mean, is it
the first one,
the 3 books in the same genre, or 3 books in 3 different genres? I think you said 3 books in one genre. I don't think you meant
3 different. I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah, you meant 3 books.
3 books.
3 different topics. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great.
3
And
different
of course,
genres.
those are on your
memoir,
website.
Memoir. Yeah. Memoir, how to free yourself from PTSD, and the spiritual one.
Well, let me ask you, I'm just going to, let me do something for entertainment, and that is, who is you think the most famous person you may have met on as a stewardess?
John Wayne.
John Wayne. So he was on one of your flights. Great. Was he? I guess he was really big, huh?
Yes. Red Skelton. You know why? I had the run between Vegas and Hollywood.
Oh, wow. So you got to see a lot of stars.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fun. And you were little.
And I got autographs.
And you were little, young, and cute, right?
Yes. And look at me now. Happier than then.
Yeah, much happier than then.
I had all that stuff stuffed in. The therapist that I finally got was a very spiritual man called Dr. Weiss. You may know him.
Oh yeah, he's a good friend.
Absolutely. He said that I had low-grade chronic depression, at least since I was young, 50 years. So he worked with me intensively and over the years, and I journaled and so forth, processed it. Out of my processing recovery of PTSD came this spiritual growth like a blossom. I explain it in the books.
Yeah, that is great. So with this type of trauma that you had, and certainly you didn't mention all of it, I mean, being let's say you were in wartime, right? When you were young, the war
exactly
was still going on, and the bombs were going on, and so
the bombs were dropped. The bombs were dropping in the neighborhoods, and bodies were laying there at nighttime. And our home, my grandmother's home where I lived with my mother, was bombed.
So
And only the stairs remain.
Oh my goodness. So I'm thinking that when someone has some pretty deep trauma, it's probably going to be very difficult for them to make it through without some extra help. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nowadays with COVID, I've written a blog if you got traumatized by COVID, which probably 80% of the people are, go talk it out with a friend, therapist, write journals, anything, you know, talk with someone about it. Professional help is the best, but traumas really have to be worked out piece by piece. And it's a long time, but it's worth it. Let me tell you, please.
Yeah.
I had no self-worth. No self-worth. When I regained that, just with a little work with Dr. Wise, I said, I have to share this with people. And that's when I started writing. Never had written before.
Wonderful. And I do
And
love
I
book.
want, yes, thank you. And it's been a marvelous journey. As long as we know what I've learned is the trials are wrapped in a success story if we see the opportunity to make connection with the higher self and find out who we are.
Yeah. So you were like a diamond, a coal with all of the pressure created the diamond in your life, in your life.
Thank you.
Well, I'm wondering, for people who cannot afford therapy, I mean, is there anything you can say that might lead someone who's undergoing a tremendous amount of grief or trauma, head them in a direction? I guess maybe your book, you have a book that might help.
Well, yes, there's something very important one can do is talk to your inner child. And by talk is have a real conversation. When you have trauma in childhood, you grow up, but the little child inside of you does not. So it's little. You have to start saying to it, I'm sorry I neglected you all this time, little Bettina. I was called Bettina line. Little Bettina, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were hurting. And the little child actually answers you back. You can do this verbally, or you can do this in writing in a journal with your non-dominant hand, and let the little child answer. And mine said, I am so glad you came. I didn't think anybody cared about me. And the child that was neglected, maltreated, came out and slowly started growing up to match the individual.
So we're talking about self-parenting here, because there wasn't a parent there for you when you were small. And as you said, the small part remained. In other words, there was a component of your personality that stayed and did not grow up. And so as an adult, then you parented
the
part.
Yeah, the emotional part, the the confident part, the I'm okay part, you know, and you paired that. That is exactly right.
Right. So, well, that's great advice. I really want to thank you for talking with me this afternoon. It's really been a pleasure. I will put the links to your website, to your books and so forth
Okay.
when I post this. And I want to say one more thing for sure that I always say. I will tell the audience that I I found a sign and I reposted that someone had, and it said, "I love you. You don't know who I am, but if people can hate people that they don't know, then I can love you." And so this is the way I always like to end my videos, and that is that I love you. And I love you too, Bettina. And do you have anything to say, your last words?
BettinaSparkles.com is my website.
Right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. It was an honor. Love you.
Love you.
Love the world. Love you.